Hi everyone. Welcome back to my channel. This is Phil Illy, and I'm here with Sasha Fem Reznov, um, an autogynephilic trans woman and enthusiastic Twitter poster. And yeah, we're just here for another conversation to get another point of view of autogynephilia. And I've been wanting to get some more trans women on the channel, and I think this will help round it out. So yeah, thank you for being here today,
Thank you for
Sasha.
having me.
Yeah,
So, some points of clarification. So, when they
yeah,
say trans woman, I've been on HRT for 2 years, but no surgeries yet, and I'm been incrementally socially transitioning for about 3 years. So, um, I live. This is how I go out. This is how I talk, and how I present to the public. And like I do, I feel like I pass okay. Like most strangers will like instinctively say "ma'am" or "that lady." Honestly, nothing's more gender euphoric than like an old person calling me "young lady," for example. Um,
yeah.
Now, on the concept of like autogynephilia, so something that is very much the case with me is that I definitely fit the clinical profile according to Blanchard's typology of autogynephilia or autogynephilic type transsexual. But I'm somewhat agnostic as to how that goes with my identity. So I do consider there to be like a interchange between like my sexuality and my gender identity. And I do believe in like my early explorations of my gender identity were sexual in nature, but like the whole like underlying theory behind Blanchardism is that gender identity is fundamentally rooted in sexuality. So I don't know if like my gender identity is necessarily the result of an autoerotic target identity inversion. That's a term. Any remarks on that?
Um, that's fine if you're not necessarily down with like the strict causation of like sexuality causes gender identity paradigm. I mean, I yeah, it. I personally think that's like that seems to be what's happening with people just in general. Um, but yeah, I don't feel the need to contest that too much.
Yeah, so something about like the clinical profile that really sticks out for me is that like when people think of like transgender broadly speaking, they or like they think in a very like I don't know, not necessarily fantastical, but a very like black and white view of it, where like someone who's transgender like knew when they were four, they were like they had like the brain and the behavior of someone with their gender identity, whereas like I was a pretty normal boy for like most of for my entirety of my childhood, like early adolescence, started getting weirdly depressed while going through male puberty. That's that makes sense in retrospect, but I remember being like kind of effeminate and metrosexual as a teenager, but I wasn't. I don't know. I wasn't like a girly girl by any stretch, and I'm still not. I feel like I don't know. I think there's some androgyny to my personality, so I have some very strong like trait masculine characteristics to my personality, but I'm also like I don't know. I feel like the way I experience emotions, like even before like cross-sex hormones, was fairly like feminine, and I certainly have some very like woman-brained trait neuroticism. Um, and yeah, that's only come out to the forefront even more on cross-sex hormones, where like I can really experience my emotions now, and I'm just not some like expressionless anhedonic like I don't know, person with like a blank expression who experiences no joy like I used to be.
Yeah, did you have like the anhedonia and like dissociation sort of symptoms?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I
Yeah.
remember like pre like HRT, like I there were things that could like stimulate like my dopamine centers. They would spur my interest, but like I feel genuine like joy and happiness when something is brings when something happens I like when I'm excited or someone says something nice to me, like I'll giggle, I'll like stem my hands, and that was just something that did not happen prior to HRT. Like it really transformed my mindset and how I interface with the world in such a really, in my opinion, beautiful, like it. It's almost like if you were to make a movie about like a trans woman and like her experience before and after transition. Like you could like do like a, I don't know, pretentious artsy fartsy thing where the movie's in black and white at first, but then it gradually brings like the color in as like she starts her hormones. You could do something like that, and it would kind of reflect my experience.
Yeah. I've definitely heard that sort of description in lots of narratives from transsexuals who talk about how like before they transitioned they kind of felt like they're kind of an empty husk just going through the motions, but then not really participating in their life, and then after transition they were much more alive in a way that they weren't before.
Okay. Yeah.
um,
Where should I go from there? I guess this
well,
is my interview. So I should be taking more charge. Oh, did you have a
what
question about
well,
that?
I mean you could be as assertive as you want. I was going to ask like what, like in retrospect, like what were some of the earliest signs in your life that like think like patterns of thought or behavior that now you could classify as falling under autogynephilia, but like maybe you didn't know that at the time, of course.
So I remember, so sexuality and like how that ties into autogynephilia. So like, funny enough, like when I was like 12, 13, I was like purely like obligate androphilic, even though I envisioned myself as being like a married man with like a wife and children someday. I was like only experienced like interest in like the male body and like penises. But then like as I progressed like further down puberty, like past 10 or 2, like 3 and 4, that's when I was like, nope, I love the pussy now. In theory. I was an incel in high school. Um, but I remember like having this emotional fixation that was sort of rooted in like I didn't feel like I had very loving, stable familial relationships. I didn't feel close to my family, and now I realize why that was in retrospect. Kind of unstable family dynamics, and like I felt like the love of a woman could save me. But yeah, surprisingly, women were or teenage girls were not very like they weren't very captivated by like some neurotic emo nerd who cuts himself. I guess I can use he him pronouns to describe my past self. But and has like weird neurotic outbursts. But I remember one point thinking, just feeling like I can't date as a guy. Like the way my emotions work and like the way I am, I feel like only I can understand me as a guy. It, um, what if instead of being the guy, instead of being the and like seeking out a woman, what if I was the girlfriend? What if I could be with a guy and like love him and understand him? And then I was like, I don't know, that'll never happen. Like I heard about like trans people back then, so like in high school was the early 2010s for me, and I remember like there weren't very strong positive representations of like trans people in media. But then I remember in one of like my study classes, it was like a class where they taught you how to like study and stop being like a dumb ADHD weirdo. The teacher, like as a discussion question, showed an example of like a trans woman MMA wrestler who was competing with like cis women, and like he described her with like she her pronouns, is that like you can't really necessarily tell she's trans at like a glance, but how do you feel about the ethicality? And I think that's a kind of a complicated issue, but I remember like I was fairly libertarian at the time and thinking like, yeah, this is America. You should be allowed to change your sex. Why not? But I just didn't think that could ever be like me. And I don't know. Also, like the autoerotic aspect, I remember like despite being a boy, I was like sexually attracted to myself as a teenager. It's like a very common like habit I had. So like I masturbated a lot, like most teenage boys do.
Yeah, pretty normal.
Yeah. So, but what I would do is like, there was this one part in like my family's house, this one room, especially if I was like home after school before everyone else, where there was like a glass, there was a cabinet with like glass reflective like covers to it, or I don't know how to explain it, but you could like open it, but like the it was a wooden frame with glass in it and it was reflective and you could see yourself in it. So what I'd
Right.
do
Yeah.
is like I'd sit there and like I'd ogle my own body and appreciate it like while masturbating as a teenage boy. And and it was all well and good. Felt at home in my body for like most of high school. Like I was very like nubile. I was like very much like twinkish, kind of like androgynous, and I expressed myself in a very like metrosexual, like emo, androgynous manner. But around like 10 or 5 stage of male puberty, where it wasn't, I had like leg hair and like armpit hair, but I thought like, oh, that's not a big deal. Like women shave their legs, I can do that. Armpit hair, yeah, I can just trim that away, it's fine. But then when I started getting like proper male body hair, like happy trail, light chest hair, lower back hair, it was just like, this is disgusting. This
Right.
is
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
Like, what is. But I thought, well, I can just shave it, even though it's like more troublesome. But then I'd see like other guys and like how hairy their bodies would be like for so long and think like, and I thought I was like the supreme guy for how fastidious I was with like body hair removal. Like, look, I'm putting effort into my appearance, and I see these hairy monkeys, and I'm like, why would you let your that happen to you? Like, if I was half as hairy as you, I would fucking kill myself. Like, apparently I meant that. But
Right. Yeah, because the body hair is pretty masculine.
yeah, yeah. So like, I are you familiar with like propositional formal logic?
Um, I'm not sure, but you can
So
say whatever you're gonna say.
I feel like there's sort of a counterpoint to autogynephilia. What I'm not sure if a term would be converse, contrapositive, but like instead of autogynephilia, like autoandrophobia. So like experience a lot of like revulsion to my developed male sexual traits in the latter stages of puberty. And like I felt like I had low self-esteem. I was kind of smart, but I felt like my smartness was the only thing I had left, as like I saw my body like lose itself essentially. I was like, it felt like who I was and what I valued about such a large part about who I was and who I valued about myself was dying in front of me, and it was horrible. And but I remember like giving myself very negative self-talk, thinking like, oh, Well, it's just because you're gaining weight. You no longer have a teenage metabolism. Um, lose weight, you fat fuck. Also, you're getting older. All men get older, and they don't make a big deal out of it. You're stupid for making a big deal out of it. And I remember there was one positive development in adulthood. So I've had long hair my entire adult life. Like I remember distinctly watching like a music video from like Alice in Chains or something and seeing these men with their long flowing hair. I was like, booyah, I want that. How long have you had long hair?
I only first let it grow out after I realized I was AGP.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
Um, but I also grew what some people in the community know as a denial beard because I wanted to
I had a
hide
phase
my,
with that too.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I had to conceal my face because it was like no longer my face. So I was like, what if I just put up like a masculine front? Like there are men that I think are kind of cool and beard styles are kind of cool. So if I put up a front and like create like a facade for others or something that I think would be cool in others, maybe I can like vicariously be okay with myself. And it, it just that feeling of like I'm not me, it just never really went away. Um, oh, here's a very so there's the four like axes of autogynephilia. For
You think
those
about
who are
like the
not familiar,
subtypes?
yeah, so like the transvestic, the behavioral, and the anatomic, and the what's it called?
There's physiologic and
Physiologic.
interpersonal.
Right. So the strongest one that I had pre-transition was very much so like behavioral autogynephilia. So I was like a very lonely like guy who didn't really have good like social skills. There's probably going to be more like literature down the line explaining like the relation between like autism spectrum and like transgender identities. I'm diagnosed with Asperger's, and there was a website called Omegle where like you would just like connect with a random user, and I found was like wait maybe I could do like romantic or sexual roleplay with people and this like anonymous thingy. So I found that as a tag, was able to do it, found some people, but I noticed there was a surplus of men and a deficit in women. So like sometimes I'd be like the one guy who's not like a really gross fuck who can like actually. So I wasn't very social IRL, but like on the internet I was like the one guy who's not fucking horrible. But sometimes the well was dry and I couldn't find any women. So I was like, what if I could just what if I pretend to be a woman and connect with a guy? And I remember, like, it was very fun, but also very sexually exciting to be taking the role of a woman and being subjected to male heterosexuality. Like, sometimes these guys were being, like, really sexist pigs, but I still enjoyed it a lot. Oftentimes, like, there was a limit where someone could be like so misogynistic where I was like, ew, I feel bad for any woman who's ever
Right.
known you. Bye.
Like it
But
takes you out of the moment when they go too far. Yeah.
yeah, but at the same time, like some level of like, yeah, he's being kind of like a pig. Yeah, like he's overwhelmed with like masculine lust. It's like, I kind of enjoy that. And yeah, there was definitely like a sexual response, sexual excitement to pretending to be a woman and being engaged with sexually by men. And then let's see here. Later down the line, I started, well, actually, back in like 19 or 18-ish, I thought I might have been non binary. I'm 28 right now, by the way. So this would be mid 2010s.
Oh, yeah.
But
Right when non-binary was coming out as like
yes.
a being invented. Yeah.
Well, I think it existed before then, but was being popularized on Tumblr.
Right.
So I thought I might be non-binary, and maybe that's like my the sense of malaise that seems to be attached to my like gender existence as a man and like my body. But then something happened. You probably remember it, called Gamergate. Um, and I got very wrapped up in like the anti SJW like craze, and like I was never like a conservative or anything, but I was somewhat anti-feminist. Like I was still like repulsed by like extreme misogyny and like overt expressions of sexism towards women, but felt like, well, my feeling at the time was that like feminism was like anti-man, or like they're going too far or shit like that. And I thought that Gamergate was like an actual principled like movement calling for ethics in gamer journalism. Spoilers, it wasn't. By the way, I'm now friends with Brianna Wu. Hi, if she's watching this. And part of like the anti-SJW thing that I ended up getting sucked into was like this concept of transmedicalism. So like the exploration of gender identity on Tumblr was like very like ooh woo, everyone's heckin' valid, but there was
Uh-huh.
like a backlash to that where some trans people and like were like, nope, being trans is a disorder. It unless you're like suffering from like your sex traits clinically, then that doesn't count. You're not true trans. I was like, oh, and yeah, non-binary doesn't exist too, according to them. So I thought, well, guess I'm just stuck being a man because I definitely don't have gender dysphoria. Spoilers, I was wrong about that.
Right. Like
Um,
once you realize like the aversion to body hair and stuff was gender
mhm.
dysphoria, it was probably more
What
clear.
what I thought it was I had like some form of like body dysmorphia, but it just so happened to be perfectly aligned with like male gender traits. What a coincidence, huh?
Yeah.
And I also thought that like plastic surgery might help me um, feel more at ease with itself when, with a case of body dysmorphia, generally it just exacerbates and escalates a problem, whereas like gender dysphoria, usually you can find some resolution through gender affirming care, even though there are limitations to that. Um, we can probably touch on like sex versus gender at some point as well. Um, where was I going? Oh yes, my personal experience.
Yeah, like what
Anyways,
got you to start transitioning?
so like late, like just before the pandemic, I remember like something. I started like this soft like keto diet. I was losing a lot of weight. I was lifting a bit. I was getting all skinny, and I was like feeling so good. Like I'd been overweight for all pretty much most of my adult life. I'm finally skinny. Can I feel at home in my body? And I was like, no, no, I don't. And I remember there, you know, ContraPoints, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she uploads a video called Shame around my on my birthday, February February 2020, and for some reason I identified myself in her shoes, and like I cried myself to sleep, thinking like, is this me? Do I want to be a woman? And I realized why I don't feel at home in my body. It's the masculinity. The masculinity is wrong for me. So I thought maybe I'm some form of trans. And like I remember there was a girl on Tumblr I was crushing on, and like I felt really bad that entire day, and like I had just fessed up to her. I was like, I think I might be trans of some kind. I hate being a man. Um, um, she was pro trans, so wasn't like averse to that, but it didn't really help me explore that question in any meaningful way. And it's something I ended up, well, actually, I had a goatee back then, and she wasn't attracted to like facial hair on men. So I was like, let's kill two birds with one stone. Shave my goatee to better appeal to this girl I'm crushing on, and but also I want to see if this is a face that could be not a man's face. I kept my sideburns though because I was trying to conceal the fact that I was questioning my gender identity and I still wanted to be outwardly masculine to society to sort of like just as like a
Like
cover.
to protect yourself. Yeah.
And like I saw the contour of my face, like to be clear, I've not had any FFS, and I noticed like just how pointy my chin is and like the very androgynous contour for my mandibles, and being like, yeah, this doesn't have to be a man's face. Um, and then I heard about, oh yeah, I've also this is sort of tied into like autogynephilia, but like gynandromorphophilia. Um,
Yeah.
I remember in 2018, like finding out about like traps, femboys, and being like, I know these are guys, but that's fucking hot. Seeing like a clean shaven, like twinkish body with like with a dick, and I was like, that's hot as fuck. And I remember being like, well, I'm still straight. Like, it's I'm only attracted to them because my brain is being tricked into thinking that's a woman. But then, like, I remember seeing like this one image of the femboy in socks with like a large erect penis, and thinking like, I want that. Like, I want to give him head, and then me thinking like, what? Why? That's not very straight. This was all the way back in like 2018. So then I was remembered femboys, and femboys were popular on Twitter again. And so I was like, I'll try being a femboy. So like I cut off, made some clothes I had never worn to cutoffs, ordered some cheap Amazon black thigh highs. I folded a shirt into like a mask, and then was just like pose all feminine, femboy, yay. Oh yeah, also like did some marker on my eyes, and I felt better. It was I felt more at home with myself. Like it was like I get to express myself in a way I want to express myself, and I feel cute for the first time as an adult. Cute, like that's amazing.
Right. Like feeling attractive for the first time is kind of a
Yeah.
powerful thing.
Like I did date women, have like actual IRL relationships at some point. Like I had like two different girlfriends in 2017, and I remember back in early 2018, a girl who had broken up with me wanted to get back to me, and she said like, "Hey, I went through a bipolar episode. I'm sorry for breaking up with you, but you were basically the best a guy has ever given me, in terms of like being kind and loving and yeah, let's give it another chance." And I tried it, but didn't really feel it. And oh well. Hope she's doing well. She was really sweet to me. I've not really reached out to her post transition. Maybe I should at some point. Anyways, where was I? Ugh,
Oh,
I've
I,
been
I think
really
I
long
asked
with
you
this.
like what precipitated your transition. Like,
Yes, so I was like contextualizing and uh, doing the exposition or background to it. Femboy. Um, And this also plays into the autogynephilia thing. I didn't just feel cute, I felt sexy as a femboy. So I was like, well, maybe I can create like an alternate Twitter account, private it, and do like a lewd femboy thing. And boy, was that fun. Like it was so simple. Like I'd post like one picture on my main where it's like, look at me, all cute with my skirt and my stockings, feminine poses, ooh ooh, heckin', I'm heckin' valid. But then on the other account, I'd be like, awesome. Here, here's my erect dick. Like, pressing up against my skirt. Isn't that hot? Yeah. It was it was very crude.
Yeah, it often
Explanation.
starts out crude.
Yeah, and like I don't know, I'd be more in the mood to masturbate as a result of cross-dressing. Um, and it's not like I'd instantly like I'd put on the skirt and I'd instantly have a euphoria boner as like I've heard about on Reddit, but it would be like it would just I'd be more in the mood to like be in touch with myself and touch myself, pun intended. But continued like that. I kind of liked being a femboy, but um, it just wasn't enough, is what I found. And like I was also rethinking concepts like self ID versus transmedicalism. Like I had already previously gone for like a far left phase. Okay, cool. Now I'm self ID. There's nothing more to being trans other than saying you're trans, but I'm not saying I'm trans, therefore I'm not. Well, that's a pretty crappy conclusion to come to. Um, so I realized, like, no, there is something that really makes me feel not at home with the existence of a man. Like, um, and I remember there was a debate between two like streaming personalities that I watched. I'm going to name drop them now. Actually, I don't know if either one would appreciate that. But let's go for it. It was Riley Grace Rochong and Demon Mama. And coincidentally, again, this happened on my birthday, February 2021. Um, a debate between Demon Mama on what is gender, what is a woman, where um, Demon Mama is very dogmatically asserting the sort of self ID arguments, whereas like Riley Grace Rochong is saying like, no, there's a psychological dimension to gender identity, and there seems to be like an interplay between like one's subjective sense of themselves and their gender and like the what society says is like objectively gender and like how people want to be more at home with themselves, how to express themselves, or what body they want. And I was like, that's it. That's the answer I was looking for. It's not stringently transmedicalist, but it's saying that there's something to gender. There's something. And I remember like Demon Mama was being a fucking bully to Riley, poor Riley, and like being like I had previously respected her to somewhat, but then like seeing how like bad faith she was being towards Riley and just being a jerk, a bully, and I was like, I am mad at Demon Mama. I really like what Riley's saying, and I remember shortly after. Well, I also started identifying as bisexual instead of straight. Like I literally put in my profile cis het he him femboy because I was like I don't deserve to like be gendered differently, or I don't know if it was a deserve thing. I just didn't think it was right, or I didn't want to be mistaken for something else.
And it's kind of like I see it as like the early stage of the cross gender development process where
Mhm.
like you had the original masculine self and it's like just starting to get like sort of overwritten or
Sure.
infused with the female self.
Yeah. So I identified as bisexual that year, and I also put gender confused in my bio. But then later, I went on a vacation to see an old high school friend. Apparently, similarly has like gender dysphoria, and well, actually, I told him I was a femboy, and he was like, "I've had gender dysphoria since for about as long as I've known you. I wish I was a girl." I say he, him. He's not really in a stage of his life where he can transition, unfortunately, but I do want to like encourage him to find that part of himself down the road. But yeah, it's up to him. Like when is he ready, etc. Um, like when is he in a good living situation? Good. Like when does he feel ready to to go down that road? But actually, regarding pronouns, do you strictly go by he, him, or is it you kind of just accept
I
whatever
don't
people
care.
call you? Okay.
Yeah. I know I look male. Like it's pretty clear I look male.
Mm,
I wish I was female because I'm autogynephilic, but like I don't really, I don't. It doesn't bother me, and I don't want to like have to ask other people to use
okay,
particular pronouns.
understood. Um, yeah, so was driving home from this vacation. It was like an 8 hour drive from Tennessee to home. So during some of that car ride, I was like listening to like streamers. I was listening to like my CD changer. Um, but then, like at some parts, I was just alone with my thoughts, and for such an extended period of time, I was really able to parse everything that I was feeling. And then I announced, I probably have it bookmarked still. Some things aged really well, some things aged really poorly. Um, where is it? It's definitely bookmarked.
You were on like a long drive, and then you
Yeah,
like sort of had a revelation, and so you came out.
yes. Here it is. Wait, where did it just go? Oh, there it is. I've had gender confused in my bio for a little while now. I had a lot to think during my car ride home from vacation. I think I may be straight up non binary. I've considered before that maybe I'm gender fluid or gender queer, a compromise between GNC, cis, and trans. However, I've been thinking a lot about my relation to gender. I still consider myself male in the biological, sexual sense. That aged well. However, I don't think I'm masculine or want to be regarded socially as a man, sort of in between gender neutral. I've noticed it sort of stings when people regard me in a masculine manner or even compliment me like that. Like every time I've been called king or been told I look handsome, I might be outwardly thankful. My internal emotional response is just, oh, being complimented in a gender neutral or even feminine way, whether it be gorgeous, beautiful, cute, adorable, that always feels so good. Manhood hasn't always felt bad. I like being taken seriously and respected the way men are, but women are less so because sexism. A large part. Oh yeah, I was way more like outwardly feminist at the time. I still believe in some like feminist ideas and stuff. Large part of the idea of being transgender that is scary for me is giving up male privilege. If people don't see me as a man, they'll see me as a bitch, a child. They won't take me seriously. I'll feel even more invisible and talked over than I do as a man now. I'm finally going by any pronouns instead of just he and they. She's are fine. But I primarily want to explore with they, see which pronoun people want to gender me the most and which one feels the best. I'll try and figure out best how I want to present. I also had experience that just cannot be justified as a cis man. Everyone is afraid of getting older, but I am much more scared because I am afraid of losing my hair in the aging process of masculinizing me. I wonder if I legitimately have gender dysphoria, but it's very mild right now because I'm cute, young, and twinkish. Ooh, I was overstating that a little bit. No, I was not much of a twink, and I had a receded hairline. I remember I hated how I looked back when I was fat with a neck beard. The way fat distributes itself amplifies sex/gendered appearance. And maybe I will legitimately want to die if I start to wrinkle, crack, and lose my hair. I can see the front of my hairline is already thinning and receding. I'm seeing what old male looks like in FaceMap. I may want to off myself in a video game if that happens to me. Uh, and then it still continues on down there from there, but you get the idea.
Yeah. Did you go on after coming out like that? Did you go then start going on hormones?
No, so I was very preoccupied with androgyny at the time. So although I felt most at home with myself, like when treated in a womanly manner, like woman was just like so outside like my existence. It was like I couldn't concept. I had trouble conceptualizing myself as a woman. Like I had like fantasized about like what it would be like to be a woman, voice trained, with breasts, female clothing, makeup, not unlike how I look now. But I was like, I don't know if that's me. because it was just outside my experience. So what I thought was, I want androgyny. I need a medically induced androgyny. I want a slimmer waist. I want more roundness to like my hips and my buttocks, but flat chest all the way. Um, and I remember hearing about also like the sexual side effects to cross-sex hormones and thinking like, that's, I don't know. If there's one thing about my masculinity or my manness that I like, it's like having a dick and like it working right. Um, so I was like, I don't know if that's for me. So I've thought of like, was looking at all of these like DIY cocktails, like selective estrogen reception modulators, uh, replacing endogenous testosterone with nandrolene to get rid of a DHT conversion to testosterone. I was looking at like DIY methods to induce androgyny like that, but like there's no medical standard to non-binary transition. It's either like you're heckin' valid, don't medically transition at all, or it's take the same cross-sex hormones that you transition to the opposite gender with, but maybe don't take them as strong a dose. So it's like, okay, so if you're natally female and you want to look androgynous and you take testosterone, excellent, your voice is going to drop, you're going to get hairy. Yeah, that's not very good. Oh, you want to be androgynous? Cool. You're going to have a giant fucking rack of tits. Um, Not necessarily. Um, a lot of us trans women do struggle to get tan or 5, such as myself, unfortunately. Um, but I don't know. I'm very I'm very fiercely like analytical in my mindset, but at the same time, like I'm put treated myself with like so much self doubt. It was so hard to like parse what I was experiencing and like find myself. So eventually, someone had like misled me into thinking like if I just go to Planned Parenthood and form consent, they can actually prescribe um, raloxifene, a selective estrogen reception modulator. So has an estrogenic effect, but blocks estradiol reception in that creates breast tissue. So I thought, oh, so it'll estrogenize me without breast growth. Perfect. Let's go. Nope, they only had on offer spironolactone and estradiol. So I was like, maybe if I go like a low dose monotherapy, it won't really cause appreciable breast growth, and at least it's something. And I was like, I don't want to leave empty handed. I was at like just this point where I was like, so I was like not sure I had gender dysphoria when I read that thread. I was certain at the time. Like I was like, I fucking hate my body. Like, not just like skin texture or like fat shape, but also like I was just loathing my rib cage and like the shape of like my hips. And I was like, well, I'm already 26. Hormones aren't going to fix that. Is there even any goddamn point? But then I was like, well, you're headed down a very bad road by doing nothing. You've done nothing for so long. How has that worked for you? No, you're going to take a gamble. Start the low dose monotherapy. So I did. And then I soon after did moderate dose spironolactone. And oh my god, what I described earlier, before there were any physical changes, it's just my mind state. Like I could feel joy. I could, like my thoughts were clearer. Like it was almost like it was helping my ADHD too. Like I could focus for longer durations of time. I was more motivated, energetic too. Like a lot of FTMs will describe like testosterone giving them energy. Same deal for me. I felt more energetic. Like I'd wake up with a smile on my face like every morning early on. Like that's just like the level of euphoria that I initially got. And I started voice training. I started, I was, even before hormones, I was already incrementally socially transitioning. Like I was wearing like some womanly or androgynous articles of clothing. I was like often going to work with like my nails painted and like eye makeup and lipstick. Um, and I paired that with like my long hair, and I thought like, yeah, this looks kind of androgynous. Not very with my horrible beard shadow at the time. I also started getting laser hair removal done. I started being like, okay, let's try to get close to actual like female reference range endocrinologically speaking. Started playing with my doses. Right now I'm on injections and low dose spironolactone. Like for a while my tea was pretty like hard to get a handle on, but recently I switched to shots, zero point 0.3 milliliters injected. What's the concentration for this? 40 milligrams per milliliter, so zero point 0.3 milliliters injected into thigh muscles, and I was taking that with like 150 milligrams of Spiro and progesterone. And then I was like, well, let's see if my testosterone's under control now. Overcorrected a little bit. My testosterone was lower than a cis woman's. It was like 11 nanograms per deciliter. I was like, shoot. So now I take just one Spiro a day. Thoughts?
Uh, um, yeah, I mean that that that's kind of an interesting like entry into it. I mean, having the like interest in androgyny and then thinking of yourself as non-binary,
Yeah.
and but then you just start on the hormones and you're like, actually, I want all of this.
Yes.
Like,
Like I
yeah,
remember even on the like very moderate dose, a lot of trans women refer to it as like a Han dose if you're
yeah,
not really doing a dosage that will put you in female endocrinological range. I was already like Tanner 2 female development, like with like my breast spotting and me thinking like, well, shoot, I was obsessed with androgyny. Excuse me. I was obsessed with androgyny. Um, I didn't want any breast growth, and this is a new part of my body. Like I thought, like, oh, maybe I'll get like semi like chubby like chest or more fat there, but I was like, no, this is new tissue under the like developing. So I was like, do I want breasts? So one time I was like trying on clothes with people for Discord, and for some reason, like when I identify as non-binary, I like religiously wore a sports bra, like everywhere. Like, um, it just felt weird to not be wearing something under my shirt. And like I remember thinking like, so like it's okay when women show off their cleavage. It's okay when women show a bit of side boob, like when dressing, but the nipple is what's inappropriate to show off. Well, men have nipples. Non-binary people have nipples. How is it any less rude for like men to have like their nipples bore through their shirts? So I thought, I'm a silly girl. So I started religiously wearing not uh, sports bras, and then I got this idea while I was put trying on clothes with my friends on Discord. I was like, what if I just put socks under the bra so I could see what I looked like with a bust? Loved it, because not only was it just like kind of cute, but like I noticed that like I hated my shoulders for a long time, but like it was like literally taking weight off of my shoulders. Like I realized like, well, women can have big shoulders. Um, like you think like butch lesbians, and it's like, yeah, I can be kind of a futchy girl. So that was sort of what just made me decide, okay, let's not just take this like moderate Han dose. Let's like actually get serious with like fundamentally flipping my endocrine profile.
yeah. And how did I'm curious about like when you encountered the concept of autogynephilia and like how you like reacted to it at first? Like when was that?
Oh yes, so I initially saw it. So ContraPoints, she has a video called autogynephilia, and I'm like,
Hmm.
in like still to a large extent, I still am a huge fangirl over her. And I was like, I just absolutely adored her videos for so long, and that was my first exposure to it. And like my impression of it was like, yeah, this Blanchard guy, he seems like quite a quack. Yeah, we the trans community, we know best, or they the trans community, they know best. Back when I was like egging out, but I remember like rewatching it because I don't know if anyone who knows my lore, someone invented like a nasty rumor about me doing something voyeuristic at like a department store, like as like a fetishistic transvestite thing, and that really upset me a lot. But then I started exploring like Blanchardism, and I re-listened to that video, and a lot of like the way she described like the autogynephile like clinical profile, like being a boy as a kid. And like I remember like ContraPoints like saying on like Dr. K's show, like being a boy was fine, being a man was not. And I was like, that was my experience. Like it was the loss of androgyny that made me feel so like made me lose my sense of self. And I don't know. Part of what like formulated my understanding of myself as like not a man was thinking like, well, my emotions and like the way I experience the world, it just doesn't feel right in a manly way. But then I also, but then I look at like my childhood, like I wasn't a girly boy at all. Like I liked violent shooting games. I played with trucks and Legos and blocks. I I was like kind of a sexist jerk towards girls, like in elementary school age. And apparently that's very much the case with like the autogynephile profiles. Like, well, what is the explanation for my gender identity inverting itself like that? There's no like, even if I feel like subjectively my emotional state is feminine, like in so many like ways that society considers like the develop or like the developmental stages of like boys versus girls, like it's often so distinct, but I was so distinctly a boy throughout childhood. I was like, how can I make sense of that? And but it feels like a convenient explanation now that I don't feel like attached shame to it, that like, oh, it's an erotic target identity inversion. Some wires got crossed with my sexuality. It made it so that like in order for me to feel at home with my body, it has to be something that I can find sexually attractive. Therefore, woman. I want to be a girl now. I want to get rid of that disgusting man stuff. But then again, the part about that doesn't make sense for me is like I got the bi flag behind me, and I feel like it's not just meta attraction for me. Like I feel like I have very much so like object oriented androphilia. Like I really like. I still don't like body hair that much. So like if I'm to hook up with a
I mean,
guy
you
and
did
like
say you were kind of gamp in terms of like attraction to
sort of. It's
right,
like
which
there's a
yeah.
range. So like I definitely find like other non-bottom surgery trans women very attractive. I find femboys attractive, but I also like some more traditionally masculine men. Like I like men with like defined pectoral muscles and like washboard abs and like big hands and oh yeah, I also like really chiseled masculine faces I find in men. Um Yeah, so I feel like I do have some genuine androphilic desire, and obviously, yeah, I feel like my love for dick extends beyond like the sort of a gap framework. Um,
Yeah. And what's like y- is like feeling bisexual like does that make you feel like it kind of doesn't fit with the autogynephilia because it's
Well, at least not the original Blanchard model, because I think like well, his theory came from the 90s, and I believe he literally believed that like bisexuality in like natal males was basically just a myth, but it was actually his colleagues basically in the sexological community that disproved that using like his exact methods with like thallometric measurement. Like literally one of my Twitter mutuals, Kevin Sue, he was one of the head authors for a study where they use thallometric like techniques to determine that yes, men can in fact experience sexual excitement both towards the image of a male and a female in equal amounts. And yeah, I think it's very evident that bisexuality in natal males is in fact real. And I feel like I do experience it authentically. And something that goes into that is I do have some erotic interest in myself as a man. Like, it kind of was in there in like my descriptions of like treasuring like my dick and stuff, where it's like I don't know. There were some man things about myself I did find sexy pre-transition, and I don't know. Something I do sometimes is like I'll use that face app AI thing, and like I'll take a picture of me looking like I do now, just a womanly woman, and then face app swap me to being a man, and I'm being like, damn, I'm fucking hot as a guy. Jeez.
yeah, that's
So
funny.
yeah, so I do have some autoerotic interest in myself as a man, but at the same time, it I wasn't never at home being a man. I was at home being a male, a boy, but never a man. And but my existence now as a woman, it's like good. Like it meshes with who I am so much better. It's like I feel more at home in my body. Also, like women's clothes are so much better. Holy shit.
Yeah, I agree.
Like you have so much more range of expression and like ornateness and decoration. Like I'm like really like thinking in terms of, like color theory now. Like I often make my makeup or my eyeshadow like match the color selection of my clothes. Like I'm very like analytically minded, like what's going to be pretty, what's going to fit me today. And like I'm also it's like kind of like fun almost, like thinking in terms like, yep, just throwing some raggy bags over me, time to go outside. That's how you treat it as a guy, where it's like, nope, I need this clothing, it has to match my shoulders, it needs to be form fitting. What's my waist size again, stuff like that. It's getting clothes that really are in touch with you. It's so much better.
Yeah, I can relate. I much prefer women's clothes. There's a much wider variety of colors and cuts and fabrics and just everything all around.
Oh yeah, and also just like I don't know. I'm very autistically sensory seeking. Like running my fingers across like the texture of so many women's clothing articles, just like that's just so pleasant. Like
Yeah,
sometimes
they're
I'll see like
softer.
yeah, sometimes I'll feel like women's clothes where it like looks nice, but then I'll brush my fingers against it and I'll be like, no. Like to this day I've never tried latex. I don't know the sheen of latex and like how tightly it conforms to the body is just like I don't know. Maybe it works for like if you want to be in like Motley Crue or something, but I don't know. That doesn't feel womanly.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I haven't dabbled in that yet either. It seems uncomfortable and sweaty.
Yeah.
When I was curious when you talk about like say on Twitter when you mention like I've seen you mention sometimes before that you're autogynephilic on there.
Mhm.
And like what sort of reactions do you get from people?
Very mixed. Obviously the turfs fucking hate it. Well, actually, quite conveniently, whenever I get into like battles with turfs, they don't think to just go in the search bar, type in AGP or autogynephilia from Reznov to see what I'm saying, and instead of me being like very harshly reactive, like Blanchard's a quack, blah blah blah, and me being like, oh yeah, or like I'll also like horny posts on Twitter main. Brianna was trying to discourage me from doing that, and it's probably a bad habit, but like I'll say talk about things like that turn me on in like an AGP way. Like I flaunt it to some extent. Probably better to dial it back a bit, but yeah, it's very varied. So some people are being like, "Oh, you just have brain worms. You need to stop being on 4chan. You just hate yourself. You're a normal ass woman." Some of it is like, "Oh yeah, you're separate from the trans community. You're a fetishist." And some of it is just like, "Well, I'm not autogynephilic as a trans woman, even but I guess that's valid for you because I believe in self ID. Like, that's surprisingly one of the least common reactions I get in the trans community. I need to get rid of this. It's hot in here for some reason.
Right. Yeah, isn't it interesting how like the people that are all about self-ID suddenly make an exception when
No
it comes to
kidding.
someone identifying as autogynephilic?
Yeah. And like, that's the thing. Like, people, it's not just a fetish. Like, even if you're not like trans, and you don't have, or I believe you do have gender dysphoria, even though you opted out of transition. Is that correct?
Well, to some degree, yeah. I don't think of it in terms of like a either have it or not sort of thing.
Okay. So like it really does. It's so entangled with your sense of self. Like even if you're not like it's not a trans identity, even if it's just like you cross dress or it sexually excites you to the fantasy of being a woman or partaking in womanly roles or wearing women's clothes in the bedroom, that excitement is like can be so integral to like your sense of self. It feels cheap to reduce it to just a fetish. Like, is heterosexuality itself just a fetish? Is being gay just a fetish? It sort of yeah, really it just cheapens it and what all it encompasses.
Yeah.
And like the AGP profile for a trans woman is very serious. Like I was expressing very serious turmoil about like my existence, prior existence as a man, and being told like, oh well, it's just a fetish. It's not that big a deal. Well, cool. I guess I'll just blow my brains out before I turn 30. Because like I hate my existence, I hate my body, and nothing about this is okay.
Yeah. How after you like came across autogynephilia as a concept, like how long did it take before you realized that you related to some of it?
I think it was like 6 months into transition, or medical transition, where it's like, okay, some of it kind of makes sense. Like originally, I conceptualized the a more real version of autogynephilia being okay. Well, it's not that the autogynephilia is the underlying reason for a gender identity inversion. It's just sort of a happenstance exploration of your gender identity. It's through like trans or sissy porn or like because like there's sort of a taboo-ness to like exploring your gender identity, but like in like the more sexy world of like porn and shit, like there are basically no taboos, like anything goes. So yeah, cross dress, be a sissy. Hope you like that F slur. Like I don't know. I sometimes use slurs kind of flippantly, but I'm self censoring a bit.
Yeah. Well, they they can be fun. I get it.
Yeah. It's like I'll often call myself like the T slur, for example.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a fun and cute word. As much as people have tried to make it like just negative, like it's kind of cutesy too.
I feel like it's almost like giving people power, like by saying that's like the trans equivalent of like the N word or something.
Right.
Like
It's
you're
giving
saying,
the
like,
word too much power.
yeah, like they're. I don't want to be like. I don't feel like people are like, oh, they've got me if they call me that. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm a tranny, like based. I just said it.
No worries. I mean, you have the identity armor. You're allowed to say it, right?
Now,
You're on hormones and you're transition. So,
um, is there any questions you have? Because I feel like there's some from the notes that I could get into.
um, sure. Like, what's in your notes that you're interested in talking about?
So we very strongly went over the first 2 points about am I a quote unquote self aware autogynephile and how Gnostic in my identity am I, and sort of exploration and like how AGP pertains to that. But also, um, this is sort of contained in like sort of an anti Blanchardist framework, the idea of like autoeroticism is normal to female sexuality. That like if you read like women's romance novels, they don't like. There's very little focus on like object oriented like androphilic attraction. It's more about like being the woman, being the object of desire for the
Right.
man.
Like how much he wants her, and
Yeah,
yeah,
and I experience both, where like I have like androphilic like lust for men, but at the same time, like that's like the emotional center of my existence. Of it's not just a horny thing anymore. It's just like, oh God, I'm fucking drowning in loneliness. Someone please treat me like a woman. Um, I don't know. Luckily, I have two girlfriends, and they're both trans. They understand me. And yeah, I also have like some like friends with benefits on the side. It's like an open polycule. Um,
right. Which that's pretty normal for
yeah,
like late onset transsexuals to like sometimes when it's kind of like sometimes it's kind of like you're plugging into the greater like transbian polycule of like like they're all interconnected in a way. I know that like they're not all actually literally interconnected, but
right.
um yeah, that's quite common.
Yeah, that's something I've been wondering about. Like if like autism is related to like polyamorous identities, because it feels like evolutionarily we're hardwired to pair bonding and monogamy, and your brain just has to kind of work differently to like be able to explore that. Like I don't really feel possessive jealousy over like someone that I love. Like I feel like my love for them is beautiful or their love for me is beautiful. Therefore I want to share it around, share the love. And also like I don't like the feeling of being like I'm tied down to one person for sex. Like I want to be able to like hook up with others, or like there's a lot of like straight couples where they're so jealous where they won't allow like opposite sex friends or like even like very casual flirtation. It's like, no, I'm hyper flirty. That would just be hell to like I'd be giving up so much to be in a committed relationship when I have so much free will as when I'm single. So it's like, yeah, by not being in an open relationship, I feel like um I'm um I'm trapping myself almost. And I'm just not really ruled by possessive jealousy. Like I experience insecure jealousy. Like um, we're very communicative. Like, hey, we can do this or this, right? It won't be jealous if make you jealous if I do that. Cool, we're all on the same page. We trust each other. Excellent, excellent. But like, I did get cheated on in my previous like open polyamorous relationship, and that was like the worst feeling in like basically my life. And like it was like the defining traumatic event that made me like hyper depressed for like 6 months because I was so scared of losing her that I wasn't important to her. She didn't love me, and she basically just told me like, "Yeah, fuck you. I don't love you. You're a burden, and your feelings aren't important." And my horniness supersedes your feelings. I was just like, "Damn, I guess I am garbage. I feel terrible." Sorry for a trauma dump.
No worries. Whatever you want to talk about.
So,
Yeah, I have noticed that. Like, I mean, I personally feel similar in the sense of not feeling possessive of sexual partners. Like, it doesn't bother me if, like, I've done non-monogamy before, and I think I prefer it as a default. Like,
okay.
to just let the other people, like, I don't want to restrict the other people, and
Yeah.
I don't want to be restricted in turn.
Are you in a relationship or
Not
relationships
right
right
now.
now? Okay.
No.
Um, so the what if I'm to like in good faith like interpret like the counter argument that like Blanchardist would put to like autoeroticism being a normal part of being a woman. It's that autogynephiles are not like authentically autoerotic the way that women are. It's them taking their object oriented gynephilic attraction towards others, but then putting it back on themselves. It's still object oriented, but to themselves. Instead of them being like, instead of it being like true autoerotic. Is that fairly accurate to say?
Um, I I don't know if I quite like understood that. I do think that like what typical female sexuality does have some superficial resemblance to,
Yeah.
say, like autogynephilic sexuality, but I do think that fundamentally it's a different like psychological process that's leading to like that superficially similar appearance.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's what I'm getting at. That it creates the appearance of autoeroticism, but still like the alloerotic, object-oriented sexuality. But rather than being projected onto others, you seek out others as sexual objects. You put it back on yourself. You seek out yourself as the sexual object of your own, uh, yeah, object-oriented sexual gaze.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that can be one way of phrasing it. Um, what other sort of things did you have in your notes?
There was something interesting that I remember on the topic of like, um, are trans women of like the autogynephilic clinical profile, quote unquote, male brained? So like there was this conception for a while that there's male and female brains, and that if you're transgender, then means you have the brain of the gender you identify as. But then we started looking at that more closely. No, it's more of like a bimodality. There's not distinct pink and blue brains, but there was, I think, a study from, well, what's his name? He's one of like the sexology big names.
Are you thinking of Cantor?
Yes, where he like literally looked at the brain scans of cis women versus like um, AGP sort of uh, profile trans women and being like, well, no, as the men make a better control compared to them versus the women or something like that. And I think that's interesting. If I were to ever be a researcher, so like I'm majoring in psychology right now, I think my first paper would be titled Autogynephilia, Male Heterosexuality or Female Homosexuality. Because like when we think of like cis lesbians, they tend to be kind of male brain too, often having boyish childhoods, very mechanically minded. They like working on cars, like very like masculinely coded like interests and hobbies, and also in dress, like they some of them really love a butching, some of them really love a femme thing, and a lot of the differences between like straight like HSTS versus like gay or bisexual AGPTS, like it's can kind of be reflected in like cis women almost. So it's like what if we like switch up how we control things? Like how does a trans woman's like my brain compared to like a cis lesbian's brain, for example, or like a bisexual cis woman's brain, like is there like an appreciable difference across averages, and to what extent, and like how do we label it? And I would probably leave it very open ended, but just like look at it through that lens of
I,
like it depends on your frame of reference.
I do think when like the I don't put too much stock in the brain scan stuff yet, just because it
Sure.
seems like a kind of very noisy um, science so far. But um, my impression is that when they do the brain scan research, that among transsexuals or transgender people, however they categorize them,
Sure.
there is sort of a cross-sex brain shift, but it's just among the homosexuals, um,
Right.
which is like what you'd expect because like there is sort of a cross-sex brain shift associated with homosexuality.
Yes, like gay men tend to be kind of like female brained, so to speak, and like a lot of gay men, not like homosexual transsexuals, but just like cis gay men, they tend to be like feminine in demeanor. They often like love like they might even cross dress a little bit or like be drag queens or like do lipstick and like act all flamboyant and feminine. Like that's the disposition of being a gay man. It's not terribly unlike being an HSTS or unlike being a cis woman. It's something that I've sort of am coming to the conclusion of regarding like gender identity is it's much less important like the social aspect or the masculine feminine trait temperamental aspect. More so do you feel at home with like your sexual biology? And I think that's the most important question of like, am I trans? What is gender identity?
Yeah, I would agree that that is at least for like sort of the autosexuals. I think that's a good way of thinking about it, like how comfortable they are with their body. I feel like the homosexual type of transgenderism seems a little more socially me like it's about fitting into society more smoothly and you know having more romantic partner options and things like that.
Yeah, so like, and Brianna Wu's coming out, like that was kind of reflected in like what she described. I'm so happy she came out. I kind of knew ahead of time based upon personal conversations, but yeah, it's good to have more voices to the community. And I don't know.
Yeah, I saw her recent video. I thought um, it was good that she shared her experience with gender feelings. I found it pretty sympathetic.
Yeah. Um, then there's the concept of normativity versus descriptivity. Do you watch Destiny at all? Or have you heard of him?
Not by choice. I mean, he's so big that the algorithms will put him in like my recommendations or whatever.
Okay, so there's this one concept I learned through him, which is like the delineation between that's a descriptive claim and that's a normative claim. So, descriptive claim is like purely factual, like
Right, that's what I try to do.
these are facts about the world, versus normative, like you're attaching a sense of like normativity or morality to it. And it feels like when we talk about biology, sex versus gender, it feels like people are baking in like their moral conclusions with like the language choices that they make, and that they
Yeah.
feel like there's an almost like an ontology to like what is a woman, what is a man according to science, biology, when it's not quite so clean cut. So I do obviously admit that there's, in terms of like changing sex, we aren't fully there yet. Like, at least in terms of like secondary traits and like bottom surgery, damn, we're getting good. But in terms of like reproductive role, like you can't, you're never, I'm probably not going to be ovulating in this lifetime. And as much as like a trans man would love it, he's probably not going to ejaculate sperm and get someone pregnant in his lifetime, which that goes into sort of a physiologic dimension of gender dysphoria. I don't really experience that. Like, I'm largely content with like having with the idea of like I'll never get pregnant. I do want to like have children and take on the social role of being a mom someday, but yeah, pregnancy, yeah, I don't need that to feel at home with myself. And it's also like, is if a cis woman gets a hysterectomy, is she suddenly a like not a woman biologically? Like, it's all about, we can say descriptively like cis women can, or ordinary cis women can ovulate, trans women can never ovulate. Like, those are very factual descriptive claims, but people say like therefore a trans woman is not a real woman, or they'll also like bake in normativity, like therefore trans women don't deserve to socially or medically transition, nobody in society should treat them as ladies. And I feel like that's the way that like people act like there's an ontological grounding to like sexual biology, and it's like a complete one-to-one linearity between gender. It's just junk, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's possible to change sex, but I do think it's good that society is changing in a way that allows um,
Yeah.
more people to pursue transsexualism if that's what they need to feel okay with themselves.
Yeah, and that is something that should sort of be that people should be briefed with. Like, some, I guess, honestly, I feel like you have to be dumb to be misled this way. But if you think that what's essential to existing as a woman is ovulating and getting pregnant, and you want to be a trans woman, yeah, that's not happening, honey. Uh, something I see with a lot of like political detransitioners, they'll say like I got transed. People tricked me into thinking I could be truly ontologically the opposite sex. And it's like, how dumb are you? Honestly. Like
Well, to be fair, like in transgender discourse, if you don't go along with the idea that people can change sex, people get mad at you. Like it goes against the orthodoxy.
well, they'll say that like the reproductive traits are not of importance to someone's essential sexual identity, which is like agree or disagree, but the just I don't think anyone is deluded enough into thinking that a trans woman can ovulate, or a trans man can engage in spermatogenesis. Like, we're just not there yet, medically speaking. Like, it's going to be a huge news story when we have like the first like successful womb transplant from a cis woman to a trans woman. She can get pregnant. Like, that's going to be like major. Like, holy shit, what a new thing. What an innovation or evolution of medicine. What a miracle.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds really dangerous, and I kind of expect whoever gets that first, it's gonna
Yes,
be organ rejection and like really
I agree.
dangerous.
But there was a point where people thought that it was impossible for humans to travel past the sound barrier, and hypersonic jets are just a fact of military infrastructure. Like basically any like country, if they have like sufficient like jet fuel and like engineering techs, they can create fighter jets now. That's just a thing they can do. And like a lot rockets, like most rockets are supersonic. Like North Korea, like a where like half of the population is like is like not getting their nutritional needs met. They are developing like hypersonic intercontinental missiles. Like they can enrich their uranium to the point to create like atomic bombs. Kind of scary, but probably North Korea doesn't want to fuck with us. It's probably more deterrent based. Like we fought for so long that it was impossible to like pass that sound barrier for like human travel, but no, it's just a fact of life now.
Right. I mean, it probably will ultimately be possible because I don't think it's prohibited by the laws of physics, and
Right.
anything that is allowable by the laws of physics can ultimately be possible given sufficient technology.
I don't know. It feels like some trans people talk about like trans women having like a female essence, like we have female souls. But it feels like the anti-trans people have like that same underlying appeal. They feel like men and women have separate souls. They're just like fundamentally with like the way the universe is constructed, different ways of being. And I'm like, that sounds like complete junk. We're going to figure out genetics someday. We're going to figure out like how to like use like stem cells to like grow cross-sex body parts. We'll probably live in like a transhumanist future where like people can like modify their sexual biology, not even just like because they're transgender, but they just want to play with it. Like, hey, maybe we'll be like a cis woman could be like, maybe it'll be kind of cool to experiment with having a dick today. Okay, I'm tired with it. Let's go back. Like, that's probably going to be our future. Um,
Is I see that we're coming up on about an hour and a half. Is there any like I guess something I usually like to ask is like for anyone in the audience who is like either like autogynephilic or gender questioning or whatever, like what would you want to say to them?
I'd say that, I'd say that there shouldn't be shame in what you are. And you're free to like explore yourself and whatever road that brings you to. And um, whether or not you want to like just be a cross dresser or you want it to be define only your sexuality and you don't feel like it's essential to like the gender you want to exist as, like that's up to you. Um, does it distress you? Is it a blessing? Is it a curse? That's how you want to. It's up to you on how you want to frame it. Um, and personally, I think the existence of trans women is beautiful. I see, although it was certainly distressing finding myself and like feeling like I was wrong in my existence, I see beauty and poetry in like my existence and finding myself in retrospect. It's, I'd say there's nothing fundamentally wrong with you. Keep being you, keep finding yourself. I guess that's what I'll leave it with.
Yeah, I think those are all good things to say for sure. Um yeah, do you want to plug any of your socials or anything so people can find you?
Yes, so I go by the moniker Sasha Fem Reznov, but if you were to search my on Twitter, it would be Reznov Rules, no spaces, and the rules is spelled RULZ instead of corrected
Okay.
because I thought that was cool as a teenager. Um,
I'll put it in the I'll link it.
yeah, and that's also what I go by on like Twitch, and I also have like Fem Reznov, all lowercase, no caps on Discord. Yeah, and I also take message requests on Twitter. Um, so if you have any questions or like want to hit me up, yeah, I'm out there. And yeah, I'm very open-minded. I like hearing what people have to say.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to come on my channel today, and it's been good to hear your
Yeah.
experience.
Thank you so much for having me.